I used to think love was meant to sound like music, the kind you can't hum later, but it lingers anyway, a mood that tints everything warm and soft at the edges. When I met him, that's what it felt like, a hush after the storm, a hand on my back in a crowded room, a voice that lowered just for me. He noticed how I stirred my coffee and said it looked like I was drawing galaxies. He laughed in the exact beat I needed to keep talking. He told me my name like it was a new word he'd invented. I was so proud of the way we fit that I didn't notice how the edges of me were already blurring. The first months were a montage of light, a candle that never seemed to burn down, his jacket wrapped around my shoulders, the text messages that read like small poems. I learned his rhythms. How he pinched the bridge of his nose when he was concentrating, how he liked his shirts folded, how he checked the door twice at night and smiled at his own caution. I mistook vigilance for care. When I told him I was late, when I placed the stick with the pink lines between us like a bridge we were about to cross, he looked at me with a stunned, shining awe I wanted to live inside forever. He pressed his forehead to mine and whispered, "This is it. We're real now." I cried into his neck and thought the world had finally chosen me back. I didn't keep a diary then. I didn't need to. My body was writing it for me. My nausea had a schedule, my cravings a logic. My breath turned shallow when I thought of the tiny flicker inside me. I walked softer, like the floors might bruise under me. He began to speak in plural nouns. We should rest. We should save. We should be careful. His hand found my belly whenever we crossed a street, and I believed that was love too. The first rules were easy to mistake for tenderness. Text me when you get there, he said, and I did, because I liked the idea of being someone to worry about. Maybe don't lift that, he said, taking the grocery bag away. Maybe don't drink coffee anymore, just in case, and I set down my cup. He swapped my perfume for an unscented lotion. He moved the wine glasses to the top shelf. He bought a heavier lock for the door. I told my friends I was nesting, that our apartment was turning into a language only we spoke. I don't remember exactly when the nest became a net. Maybe it was the day he went through my phone because he was worried about scams. Maybe it was when he gently suggested I skip a work happy hour because the smell of alcohol might make you sick. Maybe it was when he frowned at the maternity jeans my sister mailed and said the color was too loud, too look at me. I laughed and promised to exchange them. I told myself it was easier to keep the peace than to explain I wanted to be seen. When the doctor confirmed the heartbeat, I watched it flicker on the screen like a secret signal from the future. I cried again, and he kissed my hair and thanked the doctor twice, as if politeness could become another shield around us. We celebrated with takeout, and he placed his hand on my belly between every bite. A metronome. It sounded like jealousy sometimes. It always sounded like a test. I learned to answer in the smallest words possible, like stepping stones across a river that had turned quick and cold. Fine. Good. No. Home. When I asked if my sister could visit, he said the apartment was too cramped and the couch uncomfortable. When my mother called, he let it ring out and said, "You need rest," as if my mother's voice could bruise me. He put my phone on Do Not Disturb and set it face down next to the prenatal vitamins. I swallowed both. I told myself he was anxious because he cared, that the fear meant I mattered. I let myself believe that control is just another shape love can take when it's scared. There was a night the baby kicked for the first time. A quick, startling tap from the inside, like someone politely asking to be let in. I grabbed his hand and pressed it to my skin. He froze, reverent, and then he cried. He sobbed into my belly in the dark, his shoulders shaking, his breath hot and wet where our child floated. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said, and for a moment, under the roof of that promise, I rested. I needed someone to promise me a map out of the unknown, even if it was drawn in pencil. The morning after, he deleted my Instagram. "Too much noise," he said. "People don't need access to you." He handed me a plain case for my phone, because the pink one called attention. He replaced my lock screen, a photo of the ocean, with a black screen that reflected only my face. The apartment grew quieter. I convinced myself that silence is just a louder kind of peace. The day of the worst betrayal was not cinematic. There were no voices raised to the ceiling, no glass shattering, no ning in the hallway. It was a Tuesday. The air outside smelled like rain that couldn't decide. He came home with a bag of groceries and a folded paper I didn't recognize. He unpacked the bag slowly, narrating the choices: plain yogurt, unseasoned chicken, whole wheat bread. He placed the paper on the counter and slid it toward me. It was a list, my list. The one I'd scribbled in a notebook I kept in my nightstand. The list of baby names and fears and questions I was too embarrassed to say out loud. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting I didn't want anyone to see, I'd written, "If he leaves, will I still be whole?" He tapped the paper and said, almost cheerfully, "Found this while tidying. We should talk about these negative thoughts." I felt my cheeks go hot, my skin too tight. He'd opened the drawer, opened the notebook, opened me. My privacy had been folded into quarters and tucked between the lettuce and to myself. I left quietly. The next morning, while he showered, I put the vitamins in my pocket as if they were talismans. I slid my feet into sneakers and tucked the list into my bra, the paper a small, stiff wing against my skin. I lifted the latch he'd installed, locked from the inside, and felt the apartment exhale as I stepped into the hallway. I left the door open for a heartbeat longer than necessary, as if the room might call me back. It didn't. I walked outside and the air tasted like metal and rain. I called a rideshare from a new account. I didn't tell anyone yet. I wanted the first person to hear the story to be me. At the clinic, I listened to my baby's heart, the swift oceanic whoosh that sounds like survival. The nurse asked if everything at home felt safe. My mouth opened. I said, "It's complicated. I promised to follow up with a counselor." I didn't tell her how the word home had stopped meaning a place and started meaning a person I couldn't be around without disappearing. I stayed with my sister. Her apartment didn't smell like anything. She gave me her bed and slept on the couch and didn't ask for explanations. When I woke at 3 a.m., I watched her chest rise and fall and felt, for the first time in months, like the world could expand again. I thought leaving would be the end of the story, that crossing the threshold would turn the final page. But the mind has a way of keeping doors unlocked. I caught myself arranging the cups the way he liked them. I caught myself checking the window latch twice. I caught myself composing messages to explain, to soothe, to make sure he'd eaten. I told my sister she didn't need to visit me at work. I said the train felt unsafe. I criticized the color of my own jeans for being too loud. In the mirror, my face was mine again, but the rules had followed me like stray dogs. This is how I learned that love-laced control is contagious. That fear, once planted, blooms in the shape of the hand that placed it. I used to think I was escaping him. Now I understand I have to escape the version of me that learned to measure safety by how small I could make myself. I wish the twist were cleaner, kinder. I wish I could tell you I left and the air cleared and the music returned. The truth is uglier. I left and part of me took his side. I am pregnant. I am not alone. It was the echo it left inside me. I am my own locksmith now, and my own jailer. And in the quiet between heartbeats, I hear them both. He always said jealousy was proof of love. If I didn't care, I wouldn't notice, he whispered once, his arm heavy across my chest, pinning me in place as if my body existed only to be claimed. I wanted to believe intensity meant devotion, that suspicion was the shadow of passion. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized jealousy doesn't protect you. It feeds on you, like a parasite nesting inside your ribs. At first, it was subtle. He'd tilt his head when I spoke about a male coworker, his lips pressing into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Funny how much you laugh when you mention him," he'd murmur, just loud enough to hook into my thoughts. I replayed my words afterward, scanning them for infidelity I never committed. Soon, I laughed less at work, as though joy itself might betray me. He didn't need to forbid friendships, he just made me so exhausted with guilt that I gave them up willingly. Manipulation wears many costumes. Sometimes it looked like kindness. He'd pick out my clothes in the morning, saying, "This will make you comfortable," as if comfort were his to grant. Sometimes it looked like concern. "I don't think she's a good influence," he'd say about my closest friend, sliding his hand across my belly to remind me of the life we carried. Other times it looked like reason. "Do you really want our baby growing up with a mother who's careless?" And just like that, the word careless became a brand seared into my skin. I dressed quieter, I spoke softer, I shrank until I was nearly invisible in my own home. His jealousy had a rhythm. If I took too long to answer a message, he'd pace the room. His voice syrupy sweet. At first, I was worried. I thought something happened. If I explained, he'd find a hole in my story even when there wasn't one. You said the store was 5 minutes away, but you were gone 7. He always found evidence in nothing, proof in silence. I stopped defending myself because the explanations twisted back into accusations. A conversation was never a conversation. It was a trial, and I was always guilty. Pregnancy should have been a shield, but instead, it became his weapon. Your hormones make you confused, he'd say whenever I tried to argue. You don't know what's good for you right now. I began to doubt my own thoughts, second-guessing every flicker of instinct. If I wanted to see my mother, maybe it was just hormones. If I longed for space, maybe I was being irrational. He didn't have to lock the doors anymore. I became my own guard, convinced I couldn't trust myself. The escalation was so quiet I barely noticed it. One night, when I reached for my phone after he set it face down, his hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to remind me that he could. "Why do you need it right now?" he asked, his grip tightening just slightly as my pulse raced beneath his fingers. I whispered something about checking the time. He let go, smiling as if nothing had happened, but my skin throbbed long after, an invisible fingerprint etched into me. Another time, during an argument about my sister visiting, he stepped between me and the door. His body filled the frame, his palm pressed flat against the wood. "We're not done talking," he said, voice calm but heavy, as if each syllable carried a threat I wasn't allowed to name. I froze, my chest rising in shallow bursts, until he finally stepped aside with a sigh, like he was granting me a favor. There were sharper moments, too, like when he slapped his hand against the wall just inches from my head after insisting a smile I gave a cashier had been too warm. The sound cracked through me, louder than thunder. And though he never touched my face, I felt the sting echo inside. He pulled me close afterward, whispering apologies into my hair, swearing he'd just been scared of losing me. His arms around me felt like chains wrapped in velvet. And still, he found ways to make me believe it was love. "I just can't stand the thought of another man looking at what's mine," he murmured, kissing my shoulder where goosebumps bloomed. He turned his fear into romance, his control into devotion. He said, without care for the side effects it left inside me. The cruelest trick was how he twisted my pregnancy into proof of his righteousness. But I couldn't silence the darker thought. Maybe you already have. And maybe that's the worst part, because every time he accused me of something I didn't do, I caught myself wondering if I'd somehow invited it. Every time he manipulated me, I heard my own voice inside, defending him. Maybe that's how the cycle works. You don't just live in the trap, you begin to build one inside yourself. I had always told myself there was a limit, a line he would never cross because love, even poisoned, still had boundaries. I clung to that idea like a fragile rope, convincing myself that his jealousy, men I barely flawed. My reflection felt foreign, like a witness I couldn't trust. Sometimes I whispered to the baby, apologizing for the weakness I mistook for love. Sometimes I pressed my palms to my belly and begged silently, "Don't inherit this. Don't learn this kind of love." But I couldn't silence the darker thought. Maybe you already have. And maybe that's the worst part, because every time he accused me of something I didn't do, I caught myself wondering if I'd somehow invited it. Every time he manipulated me, I heard my own voice inside, defending him. Maybe that's how the cycle works. You don't just live in the trap, you begin to build one inside yourself. I had always told myself there was a limit, and he would never cross because love, even poisoned, still had boundaries. I clung to that idea like a fragile rope, convincing myself that his jealousy, his grip, his control were storms that would eventually pass. But storms don't pass when you live inside them. They just grow louder until you can't hear yourself think. The night of the gathering was supposed to be safe. He'd invited a few friends over, men I barely knew and women who looked at me with polite smiles, the kind that skimmed the surface but never touched the bone. I wore a loose dress he picked, pale and shapeless, the fabric hiding the swell of my belly. "Modest is beautiful," he had said that morning, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear with fingers that later pressed too hard into my shoulder when I hesitated. I remember standing in the kitchen pouring water into glasses while their laughter carried from the living room. It was the kind of sound I used to love, messy, human, alive. But now it rattled inside me like something dangerous. My hands trembled as I arranged the glasses, careful not to spill. I knew how quickly he noticed mistakes. When I brought the tray in, he took it from me with exaggerated relief. "Look at her," he said to the room, his arm sliding around my waist like a leash. "Always trying so hard, even with that belly slowing her down." The group chuckled politely. I smiled too, because what else could I do? My smile felt stapled to my face. As the night stretched, the conversation shifted to family and loyalty, the gesture he used when accusing me of invisible sins. His hand gripped my wrist, just enough to remind me of the bruise that would bloom by morning. "Kneel," he said. A laugh rippled from one of the men, half nervous, half cruel. The women shifted in their seats. My knees wobbled, my body torn between dignity and survival. I wanted to run, but the room was a cage, and every eye was another locked glasses. "Show them," he continued, his smile wide now, theatrical. "Show them how much you respect me. How much you know I deserve it." I froze. My mouth opened, then closed. My throat burned with words I couldn't form. He tilted his head, that same gesture he used when accusing me of invisible sins. His hand gripped my wrist, just enough to remind me of the bruise that would bloom by morning. "Kneel," he said. A laugh rippled from one of the men, half nervous, half cruel. The women shifted in their seats. My knees wobbled, my body torn between dignity and survival. I wanted to run, but the room was a cage, and every eye was another lock. "Kneel," he repeated, louder this time, his voice carrying authority disguised as amusement. "She knows her place," he added, as if that excused everything. And I did, slowly, awkwardly, with my hands trembling against the floor to steady my weight. I lowered myself onto my knees. The carpet scratched my skin through the thin fabric of my dress. My belly pressed forward, making balance difficult, humiliating. I heard muffled laughter, uncomfortable coughs, the clink of a glass set down too quickly. But the loudest sound was my own heartbeat, pounding like it wanted to break out of me. He rested his hand on my head as if in blessing. "See?" he said proudly. "Loyal, obedient. She knows who takes care of her." I stayed there, my face burning, my eyes fixed on the floor. I wanted to disappear into the fibers of the carpet, to melt into something voiceless and invisible. My pride, my dignity, the fragile pieces of myself I'd tried to protect, all of it crumbled in that moment. He had stripped me down in front of others, reduced me to nothing but proof of his power. When he finally allowed me to rise, my legs ached, my body felt foreign, and I couldn't look at anyone. One of the women reached out, touching my arm gently, her eyes flickering with pity. But pity is just another form of witnessing, and it didn't save me. Nothing did. Later, when the guests left and the door closed behind them, he pulled me into his arms. "You embarrassed me tonight," he whispered into my hair, his tone almost tender. I had to make sure they knew where we stand. I didn't answer. My silence was safer than truth. Inside, something cracked so loudly I swore he could hear it. That was the night I stopped telling myself there was a line. I realized there was no limit to how far he would go to keep me small. And worse, there was no limit to how far I would let myself fall if it meant keeping the peace. For the first time, I admitted it to myself. Not in whispers, not in excuses. This wasn't love. This was a cage, and I was the bird teaching myself to sing quietly enough not to rattle the bars. And when I lay down that night, my body still aching from the floor, I pressed my hands to my belly and whispered to the child inside me, "I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." Because I knew then, I wasn't just trapped. I was passing the trap on. I woke the next morning with the taste of carpet in my mouth, knees aching, palms tender, a thin line of rug burn across my skin like a signature I never agreed to sign. Shame has a way of drying out the throat. When I swallowed, it felt like I was forcing down sand. He slept beside me, breathing even, his arm thrown across the space where my body should have felt wanted. I watched the ceiling and counted the lines in the plaster until the room stopped tilting. I told myself a sentence I had never allowed to finish the night before. I am leaving. Leaving sounds like a door and a bag and a taxi, but it begins before any of that, with arithmetic. What can I carry? What can I risk? How much silence equals safety? I started with numbers because numbers felt clean. I opened a notes app I had renamed Shopping List and typed a column of items that looked like groceries, milk, bread, eggs, paper towels. Each one meant something else. Milk, cash, a small amount, enough to be invisible, skimmed off from change when he sent me to buy approved groceries, folded into the lining of my old purse like a whisper. Bread, documents, birth certificate, insurance card, the ultrasound photos he liked to show our neighbors as proof of his tenderness. I photographed everything while the kettle boiled, a timer I knew by heart. Steam is my alibi. Boil, click, hide. Boil, click, hide. Eggs, numbers. A new email with a neutral name. A rideshare account he didn't know existed. The address of a women's center 3 bus lines away, written beneath. Eggs, so that if he glanced at it he would only see breakfast. Paper towels, allies. My sister, yes, but also the nurse with the soft voice who had once slipped. Her card into my discharge papers with a circle around a hotline. I had thrown it away in a burst of loyalty I mistook for strength. I still remembered the number enough to find it again. I moved through the days like a person learning choreography, rehearsing, steps in my head while pretending I had never heard the music. He watched me, of course. He always did. But I had been sharpened by fear. I knew the shape of his gaze. I kept my eyes down and my smile flat and let my yeses stack up neatly. Yes, the dress. Yes, the lock. Yes, the phone face down. My yeses were decoys. Inside them, a quiet no was growing teeth. He thought obedience had broken me. The truth was uglier. Obedience had trained me. And now I would use that training to slip past him. I timed my errands to the minute. I learned which cashier worked the early shift and would not linger with small talk. I learned which bus's brakes screamed so loudly no one noticed a woman take a picture of the route map. I learned the exact weight of my backpack when it held only vitamins, and the difference when it held a folder in the lining. He tightened his net without realizing I had started breathing through straw-sized gaps. "You're glowing," he told me one afternoon, touching my cheek with performative gentleness. "Pregnancy looks good on you." I told him it was the vitamins. I did not say it was the taste of a plan in my mouth. The first attempt wasn't a door. It was a word. No. He wanted me to message one of his friends, the one who had laughed, and thank him for a lovely evening. I typed a polite sentence, my hands shaking, and paused. My thumb hovered over send, and then I erased the exclamation point. I replaced it with a period. A period is a small rebellion, but I felt it like thunder. He read over my shoulder and frowned. "Add a heart," he said. "No," I said. He blinked as if the room had flickered. The word hovered between us, more fragile than I'd hoped it would be, but steadier than I felt. "No?" he repeated, tasting it like a foreign fruit. His smile reassembled itself with effort. "Hormones?" he said lightly, and kissed the top of my head. "We'll fix your tone later." I didn't win anything obvious. But I didn't lose myself entirely either. The next day, I scrolled back through the message to make sure the period was still there. It was. It glowed. I began stockpiling silence. He liked to fill it, I let him. He lectured about loyalty while I learned the creak patterns of the hallway floorboards. He monologued about temptation while I counted the seconds between the deadbolt turning and the latch catching. He told me I was safest with him, and I nodded while measuring the distance from our door to the staircase and then to the street. He taught me all the exits without meaning to. On a Wednesday that smelled like rain that wouldn't fall, I went to the clinic alone. He didn't like it. He paced, then drove me, then realized he had an urgent call and dropped me at the entrance with instructions about who I could make eye contact with. "No one," I said dutifully. I smiled inside the way a prisoner smiles at a loose screw. The nurse with the soft voice called my name. In the exam room, I watched the monitor's gray ocean and listened to the whoosh, whoosh of the tiny heart I had started whispering to every night like a pact. The nurse asked if home felt safe. Fear shifted in me, heavy as the baby. I made a decision that felt like stepping into cold water. I told the truth, but quietly. Sometimes, I said, and then sometimes it doesn't. She nodded as if I had handed her a language she knew. She didn't push. She simply gave me a folded paper and circled times when the center's back door was open and no one sat at the front. She showed me another door inside my skull. That evening he studied my face like a document. "You're distant," he said. "Say you need me." "I need you," I repeated, biting down on the part of the sentence I was actually saying. "I need you to believe that." The second attempt was practical, not brave. I hid a pair of shoes near the building's laundry room. A soft, old pair that wouldn't squeak on tile. I moved a spare key from his nightstand book, he had thought it clever, to the hollow in the stairwell handrail where the wood had splintered. I placed a small bottle of water and a granola bar inside an unmarked box by the bikes. "If you want to leave, you have to plan like you're losing power in a storm. Small supplies, reachable in the dark." He asked who I was texting. "My sister," I said. He held out his palm. I handed him the phone with a blank screen. I had already written my real message on an index card and tucked it into the prenatal vitamin box. At my sister's apartment the week before, a date, a time, a place to meet that wasn't our door. If he found my phone clean, he slept better. If he slept better, I had longer windows. He started to sense the shift anyway. Control is a sensitive animal. It smells when the leash slackens. He tightened curfews, invented new rules, calibrated the thermostat of our life so that every hour had a temperature he could check with his palm. When I stepped onto the balcony, he followed. When I said I wanted fresh air, he opened a window 2 inches and called it freedom. He never said the word kneel again. He didn't have to. The memory did the kneeling for him. The third attempt broke me and then rebuilt me crooked. A friend of his stopped by unannounced on a Saturday. The same man. I was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands inside a bowl of dough because he had decided bread from the store wasn't clean. The friend laughed too loudly at nothing. He said he wanted to congratulate us. He said he brought cigars for after. He said a joke I won't repeat. I felt the dough bubble under my palms like something alive that wanted out. He watched my face while the man talked. "Smile," he instructed softly, the command wrapped in a caress at my lower back. I smiled. The man left, the door shut. My smile fell and shattered at my feet. "What was that?" he asked, voice still pleasant, the most dangerous temperature. "You don't make me look good when you act sour." "I'm not a photograph," I said. "I'm not here to make you look good." His eyes chilled the air. He stepped close enough that I smelled the cloying aftershave he used when company came. His fingers closed around my jaw, not hard enough to bruise but hard enough to position. He tilted my face the way a photographer might, toward a light only he could see. "You are here," he said, "to be what this family needs you to be." My hands were still flour white. I looked at them and imagined resting them on his wrist and peeling it away. Instead, I went still the way prey goes still, and he let go, satisfied with the tremble he had harvested. After he fell asleep on the couch, I walked to the bathroom and washed the flour from my fingers. I watched the water turn cloudy and run clear again. A sound escaped me, small, animal, unfamiliar. I realized I wasn't crying. I was practicing leaving out loud. That night, I set my alarm to vibrate. I moved the vitamins to my pocket like a talisman. I walked through the steps again in my head. Shoes, key, stairs, street, left at the trash bins, 2 blocks, A. Right where the neon sign sputters, the back door with paint peeling, press the buzzer twice, not 3 times. I breathed until the map in me felt steady. At 4:13 a.m., I woke to his hand on my belly. He murmured the baby's nickname into the dark. "Mine," he said, half asleep. The word hit me wrong. Not ours, not yours, mine. I slipped from bed, a shadow carefully rehearsed. The hallway floorboards sang their tiny song. I stepped where they were quiet. I reached the stairwell, the handrail with its hollow. The key was there, obedient. The laundry room shoes waited like a promise I had made to the future. I put them on and felt my body become capable. At the lobby door, doubt surged like a wave, taller than me. He will wake. He will forgive. He will promise. He will smash. He will be kind. He will be sorry. He will be sorry enough that you believe him, and then sorry will turn into kneel again. I pressed my palm to the glass and felt the city's cold through it. I thought of the nurse's folded paper. I thought of the clinic's gray ocean heartbeat. I thought of my sister's laugh, how it could scare birds out of trees. I opened the door. Cold wrapped itself around me like a new skin. The street was empty in the way mornings sometimes are. No witnesses, no judges, no tutors of shame. My legs shook, not from fear but from the surprise of carrying only myself. I walked left at the bins, 2 blocks. The neon sign stuttered its tired light. I turned right. At the center's back door, my reflection appeared in the window, pale, cracked, alive. I pressed the buzzer twice. A voice asked a simple question. Do you need help? My yes came out like a cough. A woman opened the door with a face that looked like weathered wood, strong because it had been rained on. She didn't touch me. She stepped aside in the universal language of welcome. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee. A couch waited, a poster on the wall with instructions for breathing. A box of tissues that didn't demand I use them. I sat, and my body remembered gravity. My baby shifted, a small roll like a tide moving under a dock. I placed my palm where the movement was and whispered, "We did it." I expected relief to flood me. It didn't. Relief trickled, then pooled, then stopped. What flooded me was information. I had left the apartment, not the echo. His rules lived inside my muscles. I lined up the paper cups on the table and then forced myself to misalign them. I faced the door and then made myself turn toward the window. I jumped at footsteps in the hall and then breathed until the footsteps passed. I was safe, and safety felt like an unfamiliar room I wasn't sure I had permission to enter. The counselor came, soft-voiced, observant without being hungry. I told the story in fragments, like picking glass out of skin. She didn't wince. She didn't tell me what to do. She handed me a paper with a safety plan that used verbs: call, keep, go, tell, hide, breathe. Verbs make a future. I folded the paper carefully, like a flag. When I finally slept, it was on a cot that creaked every time I turned. I placed my phone face down by choice. Before closing my eyes, I whispered to the heartbeat, "I can't promise perfect. I can only promise a way." I woke to morning the color of tin. Somewhere he was waking to an empty bed. He would call, he would rage, he would weep. He would send messages that sounded like love letters dipped in acid. The counselor had already asked if I wanted to block him. I hadn't answered yet. Part of me wanted to hear the apology I had rehearsed forgiving since the beginning. Part of me wanted a clean, blank screen. I stared at the phone until my vision doubled. "Not yet," I said, surprised at my own voice. Leaving, I realized, was not a single act. It was a series of small refusals, carried out with the patience of someone dismantling a bomb. I am dismantling it now, wire by wire, while a child grows under my ribs and listens to the music I make with my decisions. I am not pure. I still line things up. I still check the latch. I still hear his voice when I choose lipstick. But today I also hear another voice, thin, stubborn mine, counting steps in a direction that is not back. The arithmetic continues. Pounds of fear divided by ounces of courage, minutes of safety multiplied by the next safe hour. My life distilled into a math problem I can finally work without him standing over my shoulder with a red pen. I didn't walk out victorious. I walked out shaking. I am still shaking. But the shaking means I am moving. And movement, even slow and crooked, is the opposite of kneeling. I used to believe leaving would end the story, that once the door clicked shut behind me, the nightmare would dissolve into memory, and I would wake into a life that was mine again. But endings aren't as clean as I imagined. Leaving him didn't free me. It only changed the shape of the prison. I live in a small apartment now, 1 bedroom, cracked paint on the windowsills, the smell of old wood and lemon cleaner embedded into the walls. My sister helped me move in, her laugh echoing through the empty space as we pushed the mattress up the stairs. She called it a fresh start. I nodded, though fresh felt like a word belonging to someone else. Here, the locks are mine. I turn them 3 times before bed, then check again, pressing my palm against the bolt until I feel the metal cool against my skin. Sometimes I wake at 3 a.m. and walk the perimeter, touching each window, each latch. He's not here, he can't be, but my body doesn't know that yet. My body still believes safety is measured in repetitions. The baby came early, in a blur of hospital lights and nurses' voices pitched just above panic. I remember gripping the bed rail, screaming into my own shoulder, while a doctor told me to breathe. Breathe, as if the word itself could summon air into lungs that felt clamped shut. When they placed her on my chest, she was slippery and furious, her cry sharper than any accusation I had ever endured. I sobbed harder than I thought possible, and for a moment, just a flicker, I believed she had broken the chain. But nights are long with an infant. Too long. When she cries, my first instinct isn't compassion, it's suspicion. I catch myself whispering the same poison he once poured into me. Why now? Why won't you stop? Are you doing this on purpose? She is a baby. She knows nothing of malice. But my mind supplies it anyway, feeding me scripts I thought I left behind. I tuck her into the bassinet and step away, shaking, ashamed. My voice, softer now, begs her forgiveness. I press kisses onto her tiny fists as if apologies could be absorbed through skin. But the echo is already there, seated. I notice it in other places, too. When my sister comes over, I find myself glancing at her phone, counting the seconds she takes to respond to messages. "Who's texting you this late?" I asked once, the words sharp before I even knew they'd left my mouth. Her eyes widened, hurt blooming before she masked it with pity. I laughed it off, blamed exhaustion, hormones, stress. But the truth stuck in my throat. I sounded like him. When I shop, I judge strangers' clothes. Too tight. Too bright. Too much skin. His phrases, not mine. Yet they roll off my tongue in silence. Internal verdicts passed against women I don't know. I swallow them back, horrified, but their taste lingers. Control has a way of reproducing itself. I arrange the baby's toys in neat lines. When she knocks them over, my chest tightens as though chaos itself is an insult. I pick them up again, whispering neat, 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 until she laughs at my seriousness. Her laughter should break me open, but sometimes it makes me afraid that one day I'll laugh less at her. Joy, the way I laughed less at my coworkers' jokes, afraid that I'll teach her to be small for my comfort. Therapy helps, or at least it chips at the concrete. The counselor listens without flinching. She says patterns repeat unless they're broken with intention. She says I must forgive myself. Forgiveness feels like a foreign language, one my mouth can't form. I sit on the couch, nodding, while my mind drifts to the sound of his voice whispering mine into my skin. Mine. I told myself I left to give my daughter freedom. But what if I only gave her inheritance? Not of money or land, but of fear, of vigilance, of love shaped like shackles. I remember one night, rocking her back to sleep, her head tucked beneath my chin, her breath damp against my neck. I whispered, "You belong to me." The words came out without thought, without malice, the way someone might murmur sweetheart or darling. But the second they hit the air, I froze. You belong to me, his words, his doctrine, his brand seared into me, now stamped onto her. I wept until the front of her sleeper was soaked. I begged her forgiveness again, though she only sighed in her sleep, lips fluttering. She will never remember that night, but I will, because in that moment I understood the final twist. I am not only the survivor of his cage, I am also its carrier. Freedom doesn't erase infection. I cut the leash, but the collar is still around my neck, invisible, tightening whenever I raise my voice. Whenever suspicion curdles in my gut, whenever I flinch at kindness because I expect it to cost me. I don't hit. I don't scream. I don't raise my hand the way he did against the wall beside my head, but inside, the reflex lives. The seed is planted, and some nights, when exhaustion drags me down and my daughter's cries pierce the dark, I feel the soil shifting. I want to believe I can burn it out. That love, true love, the kind that nurtures instead of consumes, can bleach the poison. I want to believe my daughter will grow up knowing affection without conditions, safety without surveillance. But belief isn't enough. Belief didn't save me when I thought his jealousy was devotion. Belief won't save her if I mistake control for care. So I live with vigilance, not against him anymore, against myself. I monitor my own tone, my own words, the way someone checks the stove 3 times before leaving the house. I rehearse kindness. I practice loosening my grip. I tell myself over and over, she is not mine, she is hers. And still, when I close my eyes at night, I hear the echo of his voice layered beneath my own, whispering possession. Maybe that's the truest prison. Not the one he built around me, but the one I continue to build inside myself. I left him. I survived him. But he survives in me. And I don't know yet if I will ever be free.